Under the light of Roman Catholic doctrine, the life of Saint Pope Pius X unfolds like a quiet yet monumental journey that began in a small Italian village called Ries, in the region of Venetia. It was there, on June 2, 1835, that a boy was born, bearing the name Giuseppe Melchiorre Sarto, into a poor but deeply devout family. His father, Giovanni Battista Sarto, was a humble municipal messenger, and his young wife, Margherita Samon, was known for her gentle heart and unwavering faith. Though financially poor, their home was rich in piety and love, the fertile soil from which God would raise up a great saint for his church. At the age of 17, Giuseppe lost his father. Giovanni Battista left behind 8 children and a grieving wife in even deeper poverty. And yet, it was in the crucible of suffering that holiness began to shine. Through prayer and perseverance, this humble family would one day offer the Church a future pope and saint. From his earliest days at the village school, young Giuseppe stood out for his sharp mind and disciplined character. He consistently ranked at the top of his class. Though he began serving at the altar at the age of 7, it wasn't until he was 11 that he received his first Holy Communion, common practice at the time. It is said, by pious tradition, that the long wait deepened his longing for the Eucharist. And perhaps that very longing later inspired him, as Pope, to lower the age for First Communion and to fervently promote devotion to the Blessed Sacrament. On the day of his First Communion, standing before the altar of the Virgin Mary, young Giuseppe offered his life to God in secret. His desire to become a priest had long stirred in his heart, though he hadn't dared tell anyone. When his mother found out, she joyfully supported him. His father hesitated, worried about their financial hardship, but ultimately surrendered his son to God's will. The entire village rejoiced, especially the parish priest, who began teaching Giuseppe Latin so he could advance in his studies. He would eventually attend high school in Castelfranco, about 7 kilometers away from home. For 4 years, Giuseppe walked the distance to and from school, often carrying his shoes to preserve them. It was his vocation to the priesthood that gave him the strength to endure. In 1850, after completing his studies, Giuseppe entered the seminary of Padua, one of the most respected seminaries in Italy. With a scholarship secured by the parish priest and yearly donations from the faithful, his education continued, sustained by grace and the kindness of others. In 1852, during his time at the seminary, his father passed away. Wanting to return home to support his mother and siblings, Giuseppe nearly abandoned his vocation, but his mother, unwavering in her faith, would not allow it. She reminded him that his life belonged to God. In that home of poverty but spiritual wealth, the seed of priesthood matured. On September 18, 1858, at the age of 23, Giuseppe Sarto was ordained a priest. After offering his first Mass in his hometown, he was assigned as parochial vicar in the village of Tombolo. 9 years later, he became pastor in Salzano. For 17 years, as both assistant and pastor, he lived a life of sacrifice, service, and deep compassion, especially toward the poor. Though he never sought honors, his superiors recognized his virtue. He was invited to serve as chancellor of the Diocese of Treviso and also as rector of the seminary, positions he fulfilled with great care. In 1884, Pope Leo XIII appointed him Bishop of Mantua. Giuseppe initially declined, but eventually accepted out of obedience. When he visited his mother before his consecration, he kissed her hand and showed her his episcopal ring. She, in turn, showed him her wedding ring and said tenderly, "If it weren't for this ring, you wouldn't be wearing yours." The Diocese of Mantua was in poor spiritual condition. The seminary was nearly empty, and the faithful had grown indifferent, affected by secularism and moral laxity. But Bishop Sarto did not retreat in fear. He traveled extensively across the diocese, visited parishes, listened to his priests, and called for a diocesan synod. He launched reform with zeal, raised funds to rebuild the seminary, and brought integrity back to both theology and pastoral life. In one anecdote, passed down by tradition, he arrived at a parish one morning and saw a line of parishioners waiting for confession. Quietly, he entered the confessional and began hearing confessions himself, surprising the local pastor. He often helped priests not just spiritually, but financially as well. His reputation for holiness and leadership spread. In 1893, Pope Leo XIII named him Cardinal and Patriarch of Venice. This time, he accepted promptly, declaring that when the Vicar of Christ speaks, one must obey without delay or calculation. As Patriarch, he built churches, orphanages, seminaries, and even a new canon law faculty. He founded a Catholic press office and encouraged the faithful to defend the dignity of God's law in public life. When Pope Leo XIII died on July 20, 1903, Cardinal Sarto had to borrow money to travel to Rome for the conclave. During the election, the Emperor of Austria attempted to veto Cardinal Rampola's candidacy, a fact confirmed by history. Initially, Cardinal Sarto received only a handful of votes. It is passed down, by oral tradition, that Cardinal Gibbons of the United States urged him not to refuse the election. On the seventh ballot, on August 4, 1903, Giuseppe Sarto was elected Pope, with 50 out of 62 votes. To prevent future political interference, Pope Pius X later issued the Apostolic Constitution Commissum Nobis. It is said, also by tradition, that when asked whether he accepted the papacy, his eyes filled with tears, and he replied, "If it is God's will, I accept it as a cross." When asked what name he would take, he answered, "Since I must suffer, I will take the name of those who have suffered. I choose the name Pius." His coronation took place on August 9, 1903. In his first encyclical E Supremi Apostolatus, dated October 4th of the same year, he declared the guiding motto of his pontificate, "To restore all things in Christ. Instaurare omnia in Christo." And for 11 years, he lived that mission. He encouraged daily communion and lowered the age for First Communion through the Motu Proprio Quam Singulari in 1910. He condemned modernism in his 1907 encyclical Pascendi, reformed the Roman Missal and Breviary, promoted sacred music, established biblical and musical institutes in Rome, and laid the groundwork for the 1917 Code of Canon Law. Politically, he worked to normalize relations between the Church and the Italian state, and in 1905 courageously rejected Napoleon's Concordat, embracing the Church's separation from the state and welcoming poverty as a blessing rather than a burden. His apostolic constitution, Sapienti Concilio, in 1908, reorganized the Roman Curia and signaled a broader reform of church governance. Despite his position as Supreme Pontiff, Pope Pius X remained astonishingly simple. He brought his nieces to Rome to help with laundry and sewing. He brought his chaplain and cook from Venetia. When once meeting old friends, he reportedly burst into tears, saying, "Look what they've made of me." It is said that, after his death, a small pocket knife and a pencil were found in his cassock pocket, simple belongings from his days as a poor student. But those humble items were not there by accident. To others, they may have seemed trivial. To him, they were reminders of a life of quiet labor, of constant learning, of a heart attentive to the little things God sends each day. People say he often used that pencil to jot down tasks, promises to fulfill, and names of those who needed help, as if he could not bear to forget even a single act of love. In 1914, Europe fell into the flames of World War I. The Holy Father's heart broke under the weight of the world's suffering. He celebrated his final Mass on the Feast of the Assumption and died on August the 20th of that same year. According to tradition, his heart gave out from grief. 9 years later, his canonization cause began. He was beatified on June 3, 1951, and canonized a saint on May 29, 1954. May each of us learn from the life of Saint Pius X to restore all things in Christ, to live for the love of God and His Church, and to let simplicity, humility, and courage lead us on the path to holiness. If this story moved you, please subscribe to the channel for more inspiring lives of the saints.